Welcome to worship. It's wonderful to see you all. It seems like just a little bit of snow just puts a little damper on everything, but I'm glad to see the moisture. I've learned during this whole time that one little mess up can just throw everything off. We try to get everything going right, but we've been having some upgrades going on with our overhead, so if it's a little slow this morning, that's what's going on. Last week, I didn't charge up. There's a microphone along with the camera, and we had that glitch, and it just seems like one little glitch just throws us all off. It used to be where you just came and spoke, and so, yeah. So bear with us.
Not even counting the Zoom convention.
And you know what? Everyone's going through this too, so we're not unique. But I'm glad you're here. And what's still the same is the Lord God is a graceful, merciful God, both today, yesterday, today, and forever. And that we worship. So let's begin with a song. Lord, I lift your name on high.
Please rise as you are able.
Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way from the earth to the cross. My debt to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross. My debt to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. I invite you to pray with me. Let us pray together. O God of justice and love, you illumine our way through life with the words of your Son. Give us the light we need and awaken us to the needs of others. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord and Lord. Amen. Please be seated. Our Old Testament lesson from Amos will be the topic of the sermon today.
From the prophet Amos, chapter 5, beginning with verse 18. Alas for you who desire the day of the Lord. Why do you want the day of the Lord? It is darkness, not light, as if someone fled from a lion and was met by a bear, or went into the house and rested a hand against the wall and was bitten by a snake. Is not the day of the Lord darkness, not light, and gloom with no brightness in it? I hate and despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Excuse me, I have a hard time breathing through this. I'm far enough away. Thank you. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your song. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Our first lesson. Our second lesson is from Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, beginning with verse 13. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about those who have died, so that you may not grieve as others do who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have died. For this we declare to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will by no means precede those who have died. For the Lord himself, with a cry of command, with the archangel's call, with the sound of God's trumpet, will descend from heaven, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up in the clouds together with them to meet the Lord in the air. So we will be with the Lord forever. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. This is our second lesson.
Children's hymn is This Little Light of Mine. If you want to get your little light out, you can do that too. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Jesus came to me, I'm gonna let it shine. Jesus came to me, I'm gonna let it shine. Jesus came to me, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Children are welcome to come forward for a children's message. Thank you. Well, I brought some things. I brought my own bottle today. This is, the big words on this extra virgin, but it says extra virgin, and small words olive oil. So this is olive oil. And actually, I brought it because of this. You know what this is? You know what this is? It's a light. It's a lamp. It's a lamp. And this is a copy of a type of lamp that would have used in the time of Jesus. And so, you know how that works? You know, would you like to know? Okay. Well, in this part that's whole, you would pour oil. Actually, you wouldn't pour extra virgin olive oil in it, because this is really pure olive oil. You would use the cheap stuff to burn. And the cheap stuff was the stuff that was like leftover after you crushed the seeds. And this is the nice stuff that you would put and eat and put on your salads and things like that. But the stuff that was all left over, you'd burn, and it was really kind of cloudy looking. But you put that in here. I could use this, but I would have to paint this because it would seep, oil would seep through this. But usually they would paint inside or put a little bit of tar inside here, so it would insulate that, and you put the oil in there. And then this is a wick, and this is a nice looking wick. Actually, the wicks would probably be a little piece of cotton or flax or something like that. And then you put it in there into the oil, and you trim the very end of this, and then light it. And then it would be like a little light, and you could see where you're going, be like almost like a flashlight. And so that was the oil lamp. Jesus tells a story about 10 maidens or young women. Well, we think they might be young, might have been old. And some of them had enough oil because they had brought their own bottles. They brought their own flasks, it says. And some only had enough oil in here. And they were waiting at a big wedding party for the groom to show up. And he was delayed, and guess what? Their oil burned out. They didn't have enough oil. But the ones that brought an extra bob or flask had enough oil. And so it's a parable about being prepared. We should prepare, be smart enough to prepare for things that might happen. And so that's a good thing. But I was also thinking about that. It's like we just sang about how Jesus gave to me. Sometimes there's another song that goes, "Give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning." You remember that song? And that's because Jesus also gives us that grace and love that helps us out too. So sometimes we feel like maybe we've been depleted. Jesus continues to help us through that. And so sometimes we need that prayer too. We need that oil in our lamps. But even more so, when I think of this parable that you'll be hearing about the wise ones, I'm thinking, how come they didn't share? What if you had a lamp that was burning, I would have you walk with me and we could both share the light together. I guess I'm also I wouldn't want to not only be wise, but I would like to be not mean, pretty kind, right? And so I don't know. Would you share your light with me if my light ran out? Oh, you're so good. Thank you. Thank you. And how about you, Tessa? Would you share your light? Thank you. This morning we had one of the little boys, and he wouldn't share his light with me. So, but thank you. And I think we're not only called to be wise, but the right thing sometimes is also to be compassionate and helpful for others. So I think that's Jesus gives us, not only are we supposed to be prepared, not only does Jesus give us the oil that we need to keep burning, but we also can be compassionate with others. So thank you for your willingness to share your light with me. And I'll try to share my light with you. Okay? Okay, thanks for coming.
Please rise for a song of praise.
I've heard this one before.
I think we all have heard this one.
Jesus loves me this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to Him belong, they are with the dearest song. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Jesus loves me, He who died, open me to open wide. He will wash away my sin, let His little shall come in. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Jesus loves me. He will stay close beside me all the way. When at last I come to die, He will take me home on high. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Hear the Gospel according to Matthew, the 25th chapter. Jesus gives this parable. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. At midnight, there was a shout. "Look, here is the bridegroom. Come out to meet him." Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oils, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "No, there will not be enough for you and for us, and you better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." Well, they went out to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the other bridesmaids also came, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he replied, Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour. Gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Friends, please be seated. Hear the words of the prophet Amos. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. This Wednesday, our nation will celebrate Veterans Day, a day when our country honors those who have served our country. With this in mind, I was reading a story by Howard Thurman about an incident in World War II in his book, Deep is the Hunger. I quote, He had buried 60 American soldiers who had lost their lives in the fearful bombing his ship had given in early afternoon. As the chaplain and his group of men started towards the landing crafts, one of the sailors said, Sir, here's another body over here. A Jap. The chaplain looked and saying, just with a slight tone of irritation in his spirit, What, another one? He was tired, nauseated, and exhausted in body and spirit. The men were all for throwing the dead man into the bush, as they had become accustomed to doing. The chaplain bent over to examine the body to discover he was the kamikaze pilot that had done so much damage to their outfit. It was a moment of great searching of the soul. The chaplain's mind was made up. He called his men together and addressed them as follows. Men, we must find the right thing to do this afternoon, the right thing to do in the light of eternity. Of course, I know you say that he is a suicide because his orders were to dive his plane into our ship. But in a sense, I am the same kind of suicide. I have a genuine admiration for this fellow. He, too, is a human being. I find no hatred in my heart for him. And if you search your own hearts, you will find not hatred for him either. I ask you to help, not because of any future that you have, and I will have together. But if you do want or know that, on this God-forsaken island in the Pacific, you and your chaplain face the naked challenge of what it means to be essentially human. We seek out a level of righteousness that transcends the vicissitudes of fortune and circumstance. I shall not give him a Christian burial because that would profane his own religious faith that differs from our own. But let us do this. Let us kneel down and pray to our God in the presence of this dead man as an act of reverence in our own hearts. This act will unite us beyond all conflict and all madness. When this is done, we will bury him with a headstone that bears no name, because we do not know his name, but with a simple inscription, Japanese pilot, and the date. Perhaps this act of reverence is an expression of the right thing in the eyes of the eternity. The chaplain went on. For a long time I sat in silence as the terrible words, would not be still. The right thing, do the right thing this day. The right thing in the eyes of eternity. The right thing. The word righteousness is used in the Old Testament in a slightly different way than it is in the New Testament. In the New Testament, the word is used as moral correctness, being upright. In the Old Testament, righteousness is that, but it also means the act of doing what is right. So it's both the idea that we should be right, but also doing the right thing. God, for example, in Hebrew thought, is righteous. That is, God is always acting correctly, dealing with creation fairly and mercifully, and in a perfectly trustworthy manner. God is always just and right. And you might notice how Amos links justice and righteousness together. One goes hand in hand with the other. In turn, the Hebrews believed that the children of God were to act rightly toward one another because God acts rightly with us. Righteousness comes from God. And it's that spirit people are to treat one another. And for the prophet Amos, it's not only the people of God, it's how all people, the nations, the people, all people are to act with one another in righteousness and fairness. Now, people didn't often live up to that, right? And we know that. That's a good part of the Old Testament. Boy, if you ever want to go through a brutal book in the Bible, go through Judges. But, oh my goodness, it's all there. Rape, violence, murder, vengeance. And there's that statement that kind of sums up that whole period in Israel's history. In those days, there were no king, for everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Not in God's ways, but in their own ways. So we hear about the prophet Amos today. The prophet Amos did his ministry about 760, 750 BC, so before Jesus, right? And he lived during a time of prosperity. Things were going pretty good in the lands of Judah and Israel. They had reached some really good political, economic, military heights. But unfortunately, as things were going really good, they started kind of drifting away from doing what was right. So Amos talks about idolatry and extravagant indulgence, immorality, judicial corruption, within their court systems, and the oppression of the poor by the hands of the wealthy. Amos was given this difficult job to do of turning people whose lives, they said, are going pretty good, to go back to God and to do what is right. In our own passage today, Amos points out the day of the Lord. Now, during that time, people thought the day of the Lord is when he's going to go out and have vengeance on all those people outside us. That's what the common thought was. And it'll be a great day. We can hardly wait for that to happen. And Amos kind of turns that, have you been sinful? It might not be as good as you think, because God's against all sorts of sins. He's been all sorts of wrongs. It might not be as pretty as you think, because you might be part of it. Same thing goes with worship. Worship was intended us to be better people, to do what is right, to encourage us to be able to do it. But you can turn, and it doesn't matter if it's traditional worship, contemporary worship, if it's mainline or any type of break-off groups. If worship is covering up sin, and worship is not, covering up injustice, then it's not really what pleases God. And that's what, they were having, great feast. That's the thing about sacrifices. Part of that was you sacrifice part of the animal to God, but the other parts is like, hey, we have barbecue, and and then great music. And this is great, and I just love this music. It's like a concert. The problem is, it wasn't changing people's hearts, and so Amos speaks out in these things. Not that he's against the day of the Lord, not that he's against worship, but he's against corruption, of not doing what is right. And then it's out of that the prophet proclaims this beautiful passage. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. in the Middle East, like around the Klamath Basin here, it can be dry. And there's a lot of streams that are seasonal. They're here when it's, the snow is melting, when there's rainfall. But other times it's dry and arid. The prophet Amos is talking, this is not the way God should be. God's justice, God's righteousness, our justice, our righteousness is to be an ever-flowing spring. It doesn't dry up. It can't dry up. Because like those streams of water, it brings refreshment and renewal. It brings life. We need that. We need that from God. We need that in our own society, in our own lives. Doing what is right over and over, and it should flow. We should strive to be righteous. I think that's obvious. I think it's Huckleberry Finn who said, it's difficult to know what is right and what is wrong. I decided not to bother with it anymore, and I just, whatever comes handiest at the time. I don't think we should probably live that way. That was Huckleberry Finn. And I think for the most part, there's within us, there is this natural inclination. There should be a natural inclination, unless you're a psychopath, that you want to do what is right. I think it was the late Senator Clyde Swanson, Secretary of the Navy in World War II too. He was asked what principle he owed his success for, and he said, well, I had three rules of conduct, which I never deviated. The first was, be bold as a lion when the tide is rising. Second is, when the water reaches the upper deck and the ship's going to sink, follow where the rats go. And the third and most important of all, when in doubt, do the right thing. And I think if a person is to make life secure, we need to do the right thing, follow that third principle. And I think most of us do that. What a wonderful thing to be part of a church that's willing to help out the best we can. We've even through the pandemic, we've striven to keep tiny hopefuls open. We've striven to manage and keep our Luther Square going. We've continued to do food drives. We've continued to help out. Even now we're planning to do things with our Thriving Dollars and the youth group are doing the Heifer Project and trying to help out with Christmas boxes and such like that. I mean, this is what we do. This is what a church does. We try to help other people out. But like it or not, we're still flawed human beings. All fall short of the glory of God, right? And our souls, I don't think, are strong enough with the corroding effects of what? Daily life that comes up. We get tired. And that happens. And that nibbles away at our good intentions. I mean, you could say, I'm going to not be cranky today, and then you have like a half an hour of sleep, and boy, that kind of destroys that right away, right? That's or you're worried about this trouble or that trouble, financial or some physical thing, and that kind of consumes I'm going to be kind today. It doesn't happen. And I think some of our brothers and sisters, even the election results can cause short fuses. It's difficult. And then I think what happens is close to our righteousness comes self-righteousness. It's an easy shift to happen, and sometimes we don't even realize that shift has happened. It's the classic, Christian classic, Pilgrim's Progress is a quote that the road to hell, wrote John Bunyan, is even from the gates of heaven. And I think that happens. We have righteousness, and then all of a sudden it turns into self-righteousness. I read about a wife who said, for the first time in 20 years of marriage, my husband was angry with me. It wasn't the first argument we had, but it's the first time I've ever seen him lose his cool. And he told me so. And patiently I stated my case. "You're right," he shouted back. "You're always right. In 20 years, you've never been wrong." At that moment, my world collapsed. I was stunned into silence. I tried hard to understand what he meant. During the weeks and months that followed, I came to terms with myself, and I had to admit that being right in the way that I thought of rightness could be very wrong. Since I've been pressed hard on many occasions to restrain self-righteousness and allow the power of God's rightness to be expressed, a rightness that is wise and compassionate, merciful and forgiving. And the point is whether it could be the wife or the husband, and it could be ourselves and other things. What does it mean to be right? Is it just that I got it intellectually right? Or is it how I work it? Ooh,
Sorry.
I thought it was for me. And I think that's yeah. Yeah, did I get it right, God? No. I think that it's one of the dangers in the gospel lesson today, that we talk with the kids. To be wise enough to be prepared, that's okay. But when you start thinking, I've got it together and my brother and sister don't, it can move from being right to being self-righteous. And maybe the question is, do we have enough light to share with others? Can we be a reflection of God's light? Can we be wise in a way that isn't mean? Right? And I don't think I need to say it, but I'll say it anyway. That being right is not always easy. You know that, I know that. I love the story. I just read the story of Edmund Ross, a senator from Kansas way back in 1868. I've never heard of him before. And what happens in 1868 in our country, that's just after the Civil War. Chaos, right? It's still, how do you patch this nation all together after this horrible war? And then what happens? Our leader gets shot by John Wilkes Booth, right? So that's another issue. Then there's all this transition going on. Well, the president at the time, Andrew Johnson, he's like a person that has no tact at all. He always says the wrong thing at the wrong time. And he's from Tennessee, questionable state. Is that really north? I mean, Tennessee. And and then he starts on doing what he thought Abraham Lincoln wanted to do. Abraham Lincoln's policy was reconciliation after the war. At that time, the North wanted retaliation. And they took it out on the president of the time, Andrew Johnson. Then there was a movement to impeach him. Now, this little obscure senator from Kansas, Edmund Ross, searched his soul for the right thing to do. And he was considered one of the people that would support getting rid of this President Andrew Johnson. He said some bad things about him, and so yeah, he'll be on our side. Well, the vote came on May 16th, 1868, and he said, "I looked down into an open grave, and this courageous senator said he needed to do the right thing, even though he knew it would be his political death." He voted against his party. He voted against the rest of the Senate, and he voted not to impeach the President of the United States. Later he wrote, "Millions are cursing me today, but they'll bless me tomorrow for having saved the country from the greatest peril which has ever passed, though none but God could ever know the struggle it cost to me." He was a victim of intolerance that swept everything away in front of it, and it was his political death. He never again was able to run for